of God and a heartbeat. All you got to do is believe it. So I got 20. I didn't know what to do with them. They're all like dressed in their evening wear, and I'm thinking, well, if you're really hungry, jump in the pool. We had 20 people in all their nice clothes for dinner, jumping in the pool, baptize them, prophesy. They're all praying in the Spirit. Oh, 20 people at a resort. So I'm thinking, now every one of those levels, I'm telling you, they were tarrying. You know why they were tarrying? It wasn't easy. I can't explain this except that we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but the spiritual principalities and powers. The devil has a veil, and the veil is a revelation veil that limits access to manifestation. But every true revelation in the kingdom has a corresponding manifestation. If it's a doctrine that doesn't have a manifestation, I'm suspicious of it. Because there is hardly a truth that isn't meant to be lived in the Bible. Not a theory, not some kind of ephemeral vaporware, but an actual thing you experience. So, in these moves, I'm wondering, what is this next move going to look like? If indeed there's another one coming, and I suspect there is, then we're right now, collectively, we can go anywhere in the world, people get saved that fast. Go anywhere in the world, you can prophesy for people that fast. Go anywhere in the world, you can get people filled with the Spirit that fast. Even, like, there's a whole breakthrough in the area of, like, experiencing God and healing is happening even more so. But here's the main thought. This kingdom move that's happening right now, somebody's going to have to pierce the veil. And when it's pierced, like Daubigny said, you'll find there's a whole lot of people thinking the same thing, pressing into it at the same time, believing it was going to happen. It isn't like one person came up with a novel idea. It was almost articulating an idea whose time had come. Does that make sense? So, the nice thing is, the harvest does shift a little bit with every upgrade. So the harvest that we've been looking for has been a harvest of souls. I want to suggest to you that God might be after a bigger harvest. And it looks even ludicrous to talk about these things right now. But that makes sense, because when the children of Israel talked about the harvest they were given, they weren't just given a harvest of souls out of Egypt that became a church in the wilderness, waiting for the promised land. They were actually called to cross over and occupy territory. Well, I have to tell people, because, you know, on my dad's side of the family, I got like a Jewish background, that I'm always reminded that the Jewish people had an inferior covenant based on inferior promises. How do I know that? Because in the book of Hebrews it says that you received a covenant based on a better covenant based on better promises. And I'm always amazed how Gentiles are willing to settle for less in the New Testament than Jews did in the Old Testament. The Old Testament Jews, they got land. What do you get? You get a mansion in glory. That doesn't work for me. The Old Testament Jews had the promise of salvation by looking forward to the atonement, plus influence. They were the head and not the tail. There would be not one poor among them. These are inferior promises from an inferior covenant. And we, with a superior promise, superior covenant, don't have land, and we don't have economic breakthrough, so that there's no poor among us. Something's wrong. And I'm talking like a Jew to Gentiles. Why are you settling for less? You're supposedly, you got the upgraded package. So, what does the upgraded package look like? The harvest shifts. What's the harvest? I think it's a harvest of nations. The Jews go across the promised land. They go across the wilderness. Remember what happens when they cross the wilderness? They cross the wilderness, and as you remember, there was like 12 princes, 12 spies. They go check out the future. And what did they come back with? Best-selling books telling you why it can't be done. 10 out of 12 came back with a report. See, this is the hectic part. When you're going through that dipsy-doodle, that little backwards moment right there, you know what you're dealing with? You're dealing with spiritual warfare to mess with your head and mess with your life. Because if Satan sees that you're marked with the capacity to birth the future, he meets you in the present to abort your destiny. So what happens is the enemy hits you before you break through, because he sees something floating around you that's dangerous. Because you are carrying the future in you. And if you're carrying the future in you, that means you're somebody that can manifest it. So what the enemy does is when you're in that little dipsy-doodle, that little curve backwards, he's whacking you. Bam, bam, bam. He's trying to break you down to get you into agreement with him. Because if you persist in the direction you're moving in, you become part of that force that breaks through to the next level. The children of Israel crossed the promised land. You know what they saw? they saw whatever was in them during their wilderness journey. If they saw God during the wilderness, they saw God and not giants on the other side. But if they were beaten up and defeated during the wilderness transition, they ended up seeing fortified cities and giants and an occupation so strong, it made them want to park in the wilderness or go back to where they were, because none of them had faith to see themselves occupying that territory. You only have to walk around the walled cities of the world, see the political systems, the economic systems, the infrastructures of arts, entertainment, education. And if you haven't been there, you need to take a real close survey of how big and ponderous and monstrous and gargantuan those strongholds are, because they're big. God wants you to know they're big, because that way he gets a lot more fun out of you getting in there. In other words, by the time the Jews surveyed the territory, their faith said we can do it, but here's what God said to them. I'm sending you to 7 nations. Go to Deuteronomy 7 if you want to see it. It's written right there. Plain sight. They are mightier than you. They are stronger than you. Don't think I'm giving them to you because you're a mighty people. You're not. You're a weak little bunch of Jewish people in the wilderness murmuring. But I'm doing this because I've got purposes. In other words, fear not, little flock. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. I think that it's good to hit the plateau the way we have, because all of our hubris, our inflated optimism, our sense of maybe false expectation has all been kind of punctuated, and we're feeling the reality of the fact that it's a much bigger challenge than we thought. I mean, am I just crazy, or am I feeling that in London right now? It's all over the place. You can feel it in the air. Put your hands up and feel it. That's why I love the worship. I love the singing, because the singing is tapping into something that I think in the disposition of God wants everyone to have in their heart, which is these are walled cities, but they are not impossible to penetrate, because God has desired and designed that Jesus gets the inheritance, and the inheritance is bigger than souls wandering around the wilderness. It's the inheritance of nations. This is going to be maybe a great debate, possibly, because the issue of the kingdom, when it gets practical, is going to shake up a lot of people's complacency. Because what it means is those of you that are bivocational, meaning you are in the business and you're also in the church, you might have seen that as being like something you have to do for a period of time and a desire to be able to full-time, not be tent-making. I want to suggest to you that you're already in the next move. You're already in it. And here's why. Because the church in the wilderness is a different configuration than the church as an occupying force on the other side of Jordan. Because if you're going to go into those 7 nations that are mightier than you, then here it is. You want to know why we haven't seen the results? Because we've been trying to plunder the strong man's house, and we've been in the wrong person's apartment. So we got these 7 nations. I'm going to pray we find these pens will die on me, because I ride them like a cowboy into the west till then I just drop them like shoot the horse. All right, we got 7 mountains. Sometimes I add an 8th for a Mormon audience. There we go. 7 mountains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, here's the promised land. The promised land, I'm going to suggest to you, and we'll build this one, that nations are the inheritance of Jesus. How many nations? I don't know, but it'd be nice to see 1. Nations. Nations. So there's these 7 nations. Let's actually go to the Bible so that we can use it. Deuteronomy. Let's go to Deuteronomy. Does this make sense to you guys so far? Is what I'm saying dialing in with you? Are we all on the same page? See, because the more people that actually get a revelation of this, the more the veil is torn, the more quick we're going to have access to the future. And the manifestation that I'm looking for, thank you, Sharon. The manifestation that I'm looking for is going to be kingdoms actually getting in alignment with the king. Thank you. All right, so Deuteronomy chapter 7. Verse 1, when the Lord your God brings you into the land which you go to possess, and has cast down many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you. When the Lord your God delivers them